Trump had said, if they do a thing, we'll bring hell down on them, or something of that nature. The Iranians did it, scared the wits out of those Gulf states by doing it, and there was no massive American retaliation. So at that point, the Iranians gained what the strategists call escalation dominance, because they thought a couple of steps ahead, and the Americans were not prepared to do what they had threatened to do. So their threats were exposed as hollow.
Bill Bryson has a library named after him at a leading British university. Which is it? I won't ask Mark Urban. We've got other things to talk about. He's here every Monday to talk us through the big foreign policy, diplomatic and defence stories. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Morning, Ed.
President Trump has said that new talks with Iran will begin today. This is him speaking to reporters yesterday on Air Force One. He said he'd called off strikes on the country.
We were all set to go just about at this time right now, and it would have been a massive attack. We were all set to go, but when the allies ask to call it off, you got to sort of say, well, let's see. And the reason they asked is I think there's a deal.
Mark, I almost feel it's almost pointless to discuss this, because this is Groundhog Day. We're here every 3 or 4 weeks with President Trump that a deal is imminent.
Yes, happens. I mean, we could talk about Bill Bryson instead, but I think probably listeners will want their money's worth from me. Yes, I think... You're right. I mean, President Trump, I think, has done this 5 or 6 times, implied that some big military attack is on the way, and then said people have either pleaded with him not to do it, or that the negotiators have come forward with important new proposals. I think this last one, I think it is true. There was a statement put out by the Saudis that they asked him not to do it. And I think the White House has said that the United Arab Emirates and Qatar as well, both pretty important allies of the US, had asked them not to do it. And so I think that's believable. But I mean, the question is there really anything new on the table? I'm not so sure. And why have they asked him to do it? And I think that's because if we look at the last couple of weeks, we've seen Iranian willingness to escalate using the Houthis to block Saudi exports through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal even. This drone strike that happened in Egypt set a lot of people into a fit of nerves, because it potentially closed off another key international shipping lane. So I think they have, it's not nice to say it in a way, been successfully intimidated by Iran. And sort of pleading with Trump not to go for Iran's infrastructure, because it's pretty obvious that if the Americans did start bombing at high levels things like power stations and oil refineries in Iran, that of course the Iranians would respond against those Gulf states.
Yes, you write in your Substack War and Peace about escalation dominance, the point being that escalation dominance is traditionally seen as the side that's prepared to use unrelenting force and therefore to escalate and therefore to dominate. And you make the point that it's actually Iran that is using escalation dominance to its own advantage, because it can open up multiple fronts and with very little effort, frankly, can seize up the supply of oil to the world.
Yes, that's right. I mean, if we look at the war in very, very broad brush terms, what's happened since the 28th of February, there was this early period, a couple of weeks in, where the Israelis hit an Iranian gas field, the South Pars gas field, and the Iranians then responded against the Qatari side of that gas field, the Qatari liquefied natural gas terminal, and various other key energy infrastructure targets. And Trump had said, if they do a thing, we'll bring hell down on them, or something of that nature. The Iranians did it, scared the wits out of those Gulf states by doing it, and there was no massive American retaliation. So at that point, the Iranians gained what the strategists call escalation dominance, because they thought a couple of steps ahead, and the Americans were not prepared to do what they had threatened to do. So their threats were exposed as hollow. There then followed a period of almost impasse, I think you can say, until the Americans brought their blockade of Iran in. And that, I think, has been the one time where it looked like the Americans might get back into the business of being able to dictate terms, because it is very harmful to Iran. So, for example, during the period between the original blockade being lifted, when the Memorandum of Understanding was signed in June, and the resumption of violence a couple of weeks ago, that's a period of about a month. The Iranians got $6 billion worth of oil out. So it is very harmful to them when the blockade is in place, and it's still in place as we speak this morning. But what we've seen with these strikes over the last week or two in the Red Sea and in Egypt, I think critically, is a kind of warning from Iran that they're prepared to escalate again against these other shipping lanes, the one that joins the Red Sea to the Arabian Gulf, the Bab el-Mandeb, and the Suez Canal in Egypt, in order once again to achieve this kind of dominance. And as we can see, the Gulf states have been suitably intimidated by it. So it really leaves the US with very few places to go in terms of its diplomacy or military strategy.
Talking about military strategy, you've made a video for The Times on Britain's investment in uncrewed warfare, and you say it's a £5 billion investment, which you say is a gamble. To a layman like me, investing in uncrewed vessels and drones seems the obvious way to go.
Yes, in many ways it is. And of course, people talk about drones, and it encompasses a vast array of things, from that sort of little one that you can put your camera on, a hobbyist drone, a Mavic, it's often called, Chinese produced, that were used a lot in the early phase in Ukraine to drop grenades on people, cost several £100s, all the way up to something like the American Reaper, a couple of dozen of which have been shot down in this late conflict with Iran, which of course can orbit in the sky for many, many hours, launch weapons, has its own sensors. Now, those are 30 million each. So once you get to that level of sophistication, perhaps the cost advantage is not quite so obvious. And that's basically one of the points that we've been making in the video, is that the way to keep the cost down is to disaggregate things. Now, which means unbundle things. So if you have a warship that can do 4 or 5 different things, what they said in the Defence Investment Plan when they launched it several weeks ago was, well, instead of a new super duper anti-aircraft warship that we're going to have to bring into service in the mid-2030s to replace the ones we have at the moment, we have 6 at the moment, we're going to do something else, and we're going to disaggregate. We're going to take apart the radar station, as it were, that you'd have on one of these warships, the missile launchers. Then we're going to have another type of boat for anti-submarine detection, that kind of thing. And so that's the concept. That's one of the main concepts that the British are now working on, is the splitting apart of these really complex systems. These new warships would probably cost something like £2 billion each. So you can see lots of advantages to it. The reason I say it's a gamble is because the record lately in the UK of bringing warships into service is not great. We have one at the moment which is not even quite entering sea trials, but that's already 15, 16 years into the story of that warship from it being ordered, and it's still not in service. And yet these new autonomous or semi-autonomous warships that Britain would like to invest in would have to be ready for service by the mid-2030s, so a bit less than a decade. It's a wholly new technology, and obviously for it to work, all the links between these different types of vessel that are envisaged in this plan would have to work perfectly, because if someone breaks the link between the radar station craft and the missile one, it's not going to work as a system. So there's a lot to achieve technologically, and the recent record of the UK, either with its latest frigate or with its nuclear submarines, hunter-killer submarines, which is a long old story. They're taking an average, I think, of about 15 or 16 years each to build. It doesn't look like it's possible in the timescale given in that defence investment plan. So that's why it's a risk.
Yes, I can see that. I mean, I think the simplification of weapon systems has to be the way forward. I mean, is there even any talk about air defence in terms of protecting us against ballistic missiles? Again, as a layman, it seems to me the next war that we might be involved in would involve, obviously, cybersecurity, but also ballistic missiles being fired at the UK. I'm not even sure we've got a proper air defence system.
No. Well, the only one we have, oddly enough, is on those 6 warships I mentioned, the Type 45, which does have a certain ability to shoot down incoming missiles. Shooting down ballistic missiles is hugely complex. And as we've seen in Ukraine, a warhead coming in at a very steep angle of attack, that's a ballistic missile at 5,000 kilometers per hour, is a very hard and fleeting target. You've literally got seconds in the right part of the trajectory to hit it. And what we've seen in Ukraine is all kinds of innovative solutions to shoot down the drones and cruise missiles and other things that Russia fires by the hundred at Ukraine on many a night. Because the drones are low and slow, they're much, much easier to shoot down. But we see their critical vulnerability now they've run out of Patriots, which is one of the only systems that can really take down those incoming very fast ballistic missiles. So for us to replicate something like that in the UK is going to be almost certainly very expensive and take a while. Now, interestingly, the Ukrainians, because of all the problems they've had with Patriot supplies and the cost of them, we're really talking about £3 or £4 million per missile. They're trying to develop their own system and put together technologies in a very innovative way. And if anyone can do it, I suspect it's them. With the hope to have the first trials next year. So even if that goes really well, they probably won't have that as an umbrella in Ukraine for another 18 months or something like that. As regards the UK, we're back in that difficult area of do we choose to go in with the Americans with all the sensitivities we now have about are they dependable partners and buy something off the shelf from them? Do we develop something else with the Germans? That's been talked about a bit. But, that again, 10, 15-year development path for that. So we are very vulnerable in that respect.
Excellent. Well, Mark Urban, thank you so much for coming on. We were talking there about Mark's latest video for the Times Originals YouTube channel, and you can find much more from him there, talking about the intractable problem of defence funding and the kind of systems we have the ambition still to build, which I still think are pointing in the wrong direction.